Hello, everyone. My name is Alan Pozzi, and this is Knowing Real Estate with the Pozzi Group. And this is my co-host, Art Meister. Art, what's on the topic for today?
Today, Alan, we're going to talk about investments. We're going to talk about how to turn your clients into investors. And the number one question we're going to answer is, how do you get the money? And how do you figure out what's a great investment?
Absolutely, and that's I think some really good topics, and I think it's really appropriate right now, especially if you have some clients that are currently own a home, or maybe it's just part of your sphere of influence, right? People that own a home and have a lot of equity in that home, or people that maybe always wanted to be investors and don't know how to become investors. And I think if we can show them how and show them how to build wealth through investing in real estate, that's a good thing. Don't you agree?
I agree. I think there's one more point that we've talked about at length is many of us have had children that are now going away to college, and there may be opportunities there rather than pay for housing at a university.
Absolutely. So let's talk about first, before we get into it, let's talk about our options here. And I think the most important thing we can do with anybody who wants to consider being an investor, whether somebody just wants to buy a rental house, or maybe they want a second home or an investment property in a resort area, whatever it might be, is we've got to educate them and teach them what real estate's all about, and kind of teach them how to get the money and how to afford to do that. And there's a lot of ways to get money in investing, right? There's hard money loans. Right. There's regular traditional second mortgages. Again, you're going to pay higher interest rates on that. But what about, Art, if we decide to tap the equity out of our current home? Let's say I'm a current homeowner, and I bought my home 5-10 years ago for $200,000. Now it's worth $500,000. That gives me about $300,000 of untapped equity that I can use and leverage to become an investor, can't I?
Right.
And so give me some ideas on maybe how I can use that equity.
Well, if you take the equity out of your home, you go back to exactly what you talked about, Alan, is what are my financial goals? Do I want to get into the rental market? Would it be great for a second home for my family? Or do I have children that are headed off to college, and there may be an opportunity for me to buy a home in that particular area where they go to college and get a few roommates and pay it out that way?
Absolutely. I've seen that applied before, where parents of college students have bought a home, or maybe a small condominium or something, and then rented the vacant rooms out to friends of their son or daughters, and let them pay the mortgage payment, and at the same time they're getting the tax write-offs and the benefits of not having to put their son or daughter into an apartment or on-campus housing, which can be pretty costly in today's scheme of college. Tuition is enough, and then when you put housing on top of it, it's even more expensive.
Right, and that is one way to reduce your own housing expense, by renting the other rooms out to either their friends or other students, and then controlling the emotional situations that happen among roommates.
Absolutely. But another thing too is, while you're doing this, while you've invested in a condominium and you're renting out of a 3-bedroom condominium, your son or daughter's occupying one of those rooms, and you're renting out the other 2 rooms, what's happening at the same time? Well, a couple of things are happening. A, you're building wealth. Yes. You're building wealth through real estate. The tenants are paying off either all of your mortgage or most of your mortgage. And the third thing is, now you've got this. You're appreciating the home, or the condominium is appreciating in value. You're paying down the note. So again, it's another way of building wealth. And again, you can now sell that property eventually, or you can take it and continue to lease it out and become a landlord or whatever. But what happens if let's say you have a son or daughter, you invest in a property, and you decide they graduate from college in 4 years, and you decide to sell? How can you avoid, let's say, the capital gains taxes that may occur because it's an investment property? How do you think you can avoid that, Art?
Well, I think that's one thing that most investors are concerned about, is what happens with the capital gains. And the answer to that question is, they need to understand how a 1031 exchange works. The money's put into there, quick overview, the money's put into there and used for the next investment property.
Exactly. One thing that's great about a 1031 exchange, and just to let people know out there, that the 1031 is the actual tax code number. So if you go to the IRS website and do a search for 1031, it's going to pull up what a 1031 exchange is. But essentially what a 1031 exchange is, and it's a little bit more complicated than this, but we'll kind of give you the highlight, is a 1031 exchange. If I sell an investment property, then the profit I make, the capital gains I make, go to a qualified intermediary who then holds that money till I invest it in a new property. Now here's the rule. You have 45 days to identify one or more investment properties to replace the one you just sold, and you have 180 days to close. That's the high level rules for a 1031. It gets a little bit more complicated than that. So one of the things I think you need to do if you decide to perform a 1031 exchange is probably seek professional help from a tax advisor.
Without question, that would certainly be advisable. The other thing is understand that the 1031 doesn't release your tax burden forever. At some point in time, the strategy is, or should be, or might be, to liquidate the 1031 exchange when you're in a lower tax bracket.
That's right.
And then pay a lower tax rate at that time.
And that's why we seek advice of good CPAs and good tax professionals, because guess what? They can also show us ways that once we liquidate our investment to maybe save money through taking that money and investing it in a retirement plan or something else that qualifies similar to a 1031 exchange. And one of the things, I think one of the most important questions, though, we have to ask any potential client or anybody that's a member of our sphere of influence is exactly what's motivating them. What motivates you? You got a lot of equity in your home. We've raised some issues, but what motivates you to become an investor? Are you looking to build wealth? Are you looking to become a landlord? Are you looking to buy and flip a house? Things like that. I know you're familiar with some of that stuff because you've done some of that in your past. So why don't you share some of those experiences with us, Art?
Well, I think the most important thing if you're going to get into the flipping houses game is you've got to make a decision up front as to whether you're going to be a wholesaler and just turn the property over to somebody else that you contract, or you're going to go ahead and rehab the house, hold on to it, and then rent it or flip it and sell it at that time.
That's right. And I think the key is buying low and selling high if you're going to flip it.
It never changes. It never changes. I will say, as many of you know, those properties become harder and harder to come by, and the people that are really good at it and have a system in place don't hesitate to buy from a wholesaler. I mean, it's nice if the real estate community gets a listing on it and we can get a great deal through that. But oftentimes it is seller to buyer on their own.
That's right.
People go right after the wholesalers.
Exactly.
So don't be afraid of that. We're not afraid of that. And it's an opportunity for you. And then when you sell your home on the exit, of course we'd like you to use one of us.
Absolutely. And then at the same time, when you do, you want to reinvest that money so you're
And that's great, but you're going to bust a few fingers and a few knuckles along the way. You're probably going to tear into some sheetrock and knock out some of the uprights. And there's a lot of issues with that. I would suggest if you're going to tear into that you work with somebody who has the knowledge so you don't make the mistakes, because the costly mistakes you make during a rehab are painful. And if you talk to anybody who's invested, anybody who's bought and sold several homes in real estate, somewhere along the line, somebody is going to lose some money. So it's not a trajectory that is a hockey stick and goes straight up. You've got to be careful and work with professionals that you hire to get the job done. So if you buy a place with a foundation issue, then you need somebody who's going to crawl under there if it's a pier and beam and repair that for you. You may be walking through a home and fall through it. That just happens.
Yep.
So the investment side is exciting, but it doesn't come without challenges.
And I think that's so key is you got to have the right team in place. You got to have the right contactors in place. And I think, wouldn't you suggest, Art, is maybe perhaps joining networking groups and things like that of other investors to kind of get a feel for, hey, who are the contractors out there? Who are the different types of lenders out there, like hard money lenders, traditional lenders that work with investors? Wouldn't that be probably a prudent thing to do?
Sure. I can tell you when we were investing, Alan, we were using hard money on a regular basis, because the most important thing to somebody who's in a situation where they're going to wholesale a property is getting their cash fast.
Right.
And the thing about hard money is you can get that money quickly. You don't have to wait 30 days to close the deal. You can get them out of that in 7 to 10 days easy.
Absolutely. And one thing good about hard money loans is the property qualifies for the mortgage, not so much you and your credit.
That's correct.
And that, so if you have a property, maybe you're buying it for $100, but the retail value after repairs is $250, then the hard money lender knows, hey, if I have to foreclose on you, I'm loaning you $100, and I'm loaning you another $40 to do the repairs and the rehab. That's $104. I'm into it for $140, but if I have to foreclose on you, I still got $110,000 in potential equity out there if I need to.
So you have an arm's length transaction there between the property manager and the tenant, and you're away from it.
And that's a good point. One of the good things is, and it's relatively inexpensive to hire a great property manager. I mean, you're looking at somewhere to 8 to 10 to maybe 12% of your monthly income. If you're generating, $1,500 a month in rent, $150 a month for you to have a good night's sleep and not have to worry about the day-to-day management of a property is probably worth it. Wouldn't you agree?
It is, and I can tell you firsthand, Alan, that I learned the hard way. And
we all do.
And it stems from one factor. When people embark on this journey of investment,
yep,
the number one situation that I think they've got to guard against is greed.
Yep.
Because you're trying to manage the expenses as you're rehabbing a property, and that train of the way you evaluate your costs and your potential profit leads into, well, I can cut $150 a month, like you say. You can cut that $150 a month out on the property manager and begin to recover some of those repair costs. And that's absolutely not the way to look at it. The way to look at it is you've hired a professional so that you can continue with the next activity, which may be buy the next investment property.
Well, and that's kind of the good thing about whether you're investing to flip a home or you're wholesaling, or whether you're going to buy and hold and put tenants in a home. You got to remember, the good thing about having a tenant in the home is they're making your mortgage payment every month. Kind of like the example we gave you with the if you buy a condo or a house in a college city, and your child's roommates are now they're paying the monthly rent, or they're paying the monthly mortgage, and you're building the equity, you're building the wealth, you're building the profits. But I think that's always a good thing. But I think you're right, Art. Having the right team in place is so important. Whether you're flipping a home, having the contractors in place, having all the right skills in place, having the right team in place, making the contact with people that have experience that maybe you don't have, and developing those relationships. And again, if you're going to buy and hold and put tenants in there, a good property management company is a great way to go.
So one of the things that you're referring to is a little bit of humility.
Yep.
You need to understand what your skill set is.
That's right.
And admit the fact that you don't know everything. And that investors tend to be egocentric in some way.
Absolutely.
And the more experience we get, the more confident we become. And quite frankly, the more mistakes we're likely to make.
Absolutely.
So you have that team in place. And one other thing with the hard money, in reference to your comment on the hard money, Alan, is don't forget that that equity that you talk about with the hard money lender and the potential foreclose, that's also your equity if you carry the project through, and now you can refinance that property.
Absolutely. Yep.
And even with the interest rates today, that's going to be less than a hard money loan.
Oh, yeah.
And you can also take part of the equity back out. So during the evaluation phase, you need to make sure that you can still cover the note on a new mortgage if that's the way you're headed. So everything as an investor is a math problem. And
Exactly.
you've got some calculations that we're going to go through.
Let's talk about some real estate math. So if you're serious about becoming an investor, I think there's two formulas you need to keep in mind, and you need to put to memory, and you need to use them before you purchase any investment property. And the first one is the gross rent multiplier. And so the gross rent multiplier is a simple formula where you take the sales price and divide it by the monthly rent, and you're going to get what we call the gross rent multiplier. And why do we use the gross rent multiplier? Brill, it's pretty simple. First of all, we're going to calculate the average gross rent multiplier for the area in which you're buying the home. So for an example, if the gross rent multiplier for a home in a particular subdivision is 160, and then you run a gross rent multiplier on a home you're considering purchasing, and the gross rent multiplier is 175, it's over the above average neighborhood gross rent multiplier, which means you're probably paying a little too much. However, if you run a gross rent multiplier and it's at or below the average gross rent multiplier for that neighborhood, then you're probably making a wise investment. You're not wasting your money, and you're probably making a better deal than if you had paid too much. So again, remember, we take the emotion out of investing in real estate, don't we, Art?
Well, we try to.
We try to, but it's still an emotional event.
Yes, it is a very emotional decision, especially when you're investing your money.
Absolutely. And, well, of course, the other rule of real estate and investing, you kind of brought up a topic that I'm kind of glad you brought it up. We call it OPM, other people's money, all right? And that's what the hard money lenders are for, right?
Yes.
Use other people's money in your investments. I know you were quite successful doing that and leveraging that when you were an investor. Use other people's money when you can. Now, how do we do that? We got to network with people. We got to get involved in these real estate investor events and these real estate investment clubs. They're all over town. They're all over the state, but they're all over the country, depending on where you're at. But you can find them, you can look, you can join them, and you can become involved and get some knowledge there. So let's talk about the second most important formula, and this kind of gives you an idea of your return on investment, and that's capitalization rate. For short, we call it a cap rate. So how do we calculate capitalization rate? Well, we take our net income, that's your annual income. So if you're paying $1,000 a month in rent, the net income would be $12,000, okay? Assuming there's no expenses or anything like that. So you would take that net annual income, divide it by the sales price, would give you your capitalization rate. And so you have two choices. If your cap rate is, let's say you do a calculation and you figure out your cap rate is 8, 9, 10, or maybe 12%, well, then you have a choice. As an investor, you have a choice. Do I put the $200,000 I want to invest in a certificate of deposit at a bank and get maybe 4.5%? Or do I take that $200,000, buy some real estate, and get an 8, 9, 10, maybe 12% return on my investment? The math's pretty simple. If you get a higher cap rate and you buy it at the right price, you're going to get a higher return on your investment. So I think those are the two most important formulas that you should start out with as a new investor. Are any parting shots that you want to talk about before we leave today's session on investing in real estate?
Well, yeah, Alan, I'd like to review the importance of creating your team.
Okay, great.
The importance of having contractors, qualified contractors, people who can swing hammers, people that can do plumbing, people that can do your electrical work. Yep. And if there's one thing that I always shied away from, it was electricity, and I still do. So that's a scary thing when you can't see it.
You know my experience with electricity.
I have seen that firsthand. So there are always situations, if you're not confident, be humble enough to go find someone who can take care of that.
Yep.
Referrals are the best way to do it. Somebody out there knows somebody else, including us.
Absolutely.
We work with contractors constantly for repairs and situations that we need so we can move people into new homes. So
Yep.
we're a good resource for you if you need somebody like that.
Absolutely.
So I just want to make sure that when you look at investing, you consider building the team and building a team you can hang on to.
And I think that's, Art raises a good point, and I think that's where we come in as professional real estate salespeople and as true professionals. Art and I have the network, so to speak, that A, we can give you guidance on investing, just like we're kind of doing today, and B, we also have the teams in place with respect to contractors, lenders, title companies, all these other teams that are necessary in order to get the transaction done. So what happens is it's a lot easier to deal with myself or Art and then let us deal with all the other parts of the transaction and all the moving parts that go into an investment in real estate. And one of the things we'll always do, and I know Art will do this as well, when we're representing you in a transaction, and for those agents out there that want to represent investors, you want to make sure your investors make prudent decisions, that they understand the real estate math, and that they understand all the team members that are needed, and they have to. You have to understand as a real estate professional, and you have to understand, if you're wanting to become an investor, what exactly motivates you and why do you want to invest in real estate, and how can you leverage whatever it is you have, whether it's equity in your home, hard money loan, or traditional mortgage or traditional second mortgage, how can you leverage that into a real estate investment? And the key ingredient, no matter what, is building wealth.
Building wealth and your tolerance for managing risk.
That's right. And I think that has a lot to do with it. One of the things I think that I know Art's probably done it as well. Well, I know he's done it, and I know I've done it. Is your first couple of transactions, you may want to partner up with somebody and share the risk, because guess what? If you're trying to do it on your own, then all the risk is with you and all the profits with you. But sometimes, you talked about greed. Being a little less greedy and wanting to share some of that risk, maybe Art and I do a deal together, and now it's 50. I have 50% of the risk. Art has 50% of the risk. But you know what? It's better than me having 100% of the risk. So if you do take a hit or you do take a loss, it's not quite as bad because you've shared that loss. But at the same time, you're going to share the wealth. You're going to share the positive features, and then you're going to build wealth, and then you can start doing it on your own. Or maybe you form a corporation and y'all continue being partnerships. Who knows?
Sure. Sure.
There's a lot of answers. So anyway, Art, why don't you take us off and kind of close out today's session?
Great. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe. And remember, all the contact information is below if you'd like to reach out to us.
Yep.
And don't forget, who you work with matters.
Absolutely. We look forward to seeing you next time on Knowing Real Estate with the Pozzi Group. Y'all have a great time.